153 miles per hour. That's the speed Giovanni Mpetshi Pericard serve clocked today at Wimbledon, the fastest serve in the tournament's 147-year history. But this isn't just about breaking records, it's about breaking minds. Across the net, Taylor Fritz, world number 5, fresh off winning 2 grass court titles, called facing Mpetshi Pericard a scary match because some things are more out of your control. Today, we witnessed what happens when tennis becomes less about skill and more about surviving the unplayable. And when the crowd erupted in furious boos, as officials suspended their match despite 40 minutes left until curfew, we saw psychology collide with power in the most dramatic way possible.
When athletes face opponents whose abilities transcend normal parameters, it creates a unique psychological challenge. You're not just playing tennis anymore, you're trying to solve an impossible puzzle while maintaining competitive confidence. That mental shift from how do I beat this player to how do I survive this experience changes everything.
I've seen this dynamic destroy even the most mentally tough players. When you're facing serves you literally cannot return, when the normal rules of tennis strategy become irrelevant, it's not just physically challenging, it's psychologically devastating. You start questioning your entire approach to the game.
Today we're exploring the psychology of the unplayable, how record-breaking power changes the mental game, why crowds react violently to disrupted momentum, and what happens when tennis stops being about tennis and becomes about surviving forces beyond human comprehension. Let's start with the moment that made history. Opening game on court 1, roof closed, Giovanni Mpetshi Pericard steps up to serve at 30-0. The 6'8" French giant winds up and unleashes hell 153 miles per hour, shattering Taylor Dent's 15-year-old Wimbledon record of 148 miles per hour. One spectator captured it perfectly. That sound was like a gunshot. But here's the psychological kicker. Taylor Fritz got his racket on it. Think about that for a moment. A serve moving faster than most cars on a highway, and Fritz somehow made contact, chipped a forehand down the line, took control of the rally, and won the point with a volley. That's not just athletic ability, that's mental fortitude in the face of the impossible.
It's a scary match because some things are more out of your control than in other matches. It's not easy when you play someone like him. It could potentially come down to a couple of points, a couple of shots. But historically, I have done well against big servers.
Fritz's pre-match comments reveal fascinating psychological preparation. He's not trying to convince himself he can dominate. He's accepting that large portions of the match will be beyond his control. That's actually a very mature way to handle an impossible situation mentally.
But the record-breaking serve was just the beginning. Mpetshi Pericard had already broken Dent's record with a 149 miles per hour missile in the opening game, then hit 146 miles per hour, then turned up the heat even more to make history. This wasn't one lucky shot. It was sustained, unprecedented power that redefined what's possible in tennis.
When you're facing someone who can consistently serve at speeds that break records, it fundamentally changes your mental approach. You can't think about reading the serve or anticipating direction, you're basically guessing and hoping. That psychological helplessness is what makes big servers so dangerous.
Statistics tell the story of psychological warfare. Through the first 3 sets, Mpetshi Pericard averaged 141 miles per hour on first serves and 124 miles per hour on second serves. Think about that, his second serves were faster than most players' first serves. Fritz was essentially playing a different sport than everyone else at Wimbledon. But here's where the story becomes psychologically fascinating. Despite facing record-breaking serves and losing the first 2 sets, Fritz didn't crumble. He didn't let the impossibility of the situation destroy his competitive spirit. Instead, he found a way to win the 3rd set and mount a comeback in the 4th.
This is what we call adaptation under extreme stress. When normal competitive strategies become useless, successful athletes find ways to reframe the challenge. Fritz likely stopped trying to beat Mpetshi Pericard's serve and started focusing on what he could control, his own service games, and capitalizing on rare opportunities.
4th set tiebreak perfectly illustrates this psychological battle. Fritz fell behind 5-1, facing what seemed like certain defeat. In that moment, he had 2 choices: accept the inevitable or embrace the chaos. He chose chaos, reeling off 5 straight points to lead 6-5, eventually winning the tiebreak 8-6.
That comeback reveals something crucial about mental toughness. When you're facing the impossible, sometimes the only way to succeed is to stop trying to be logical and start playing on pure instinct and emotion. Fritz stopped thinking and started reacting, and it worked.
Meanwhile, Mpetshi Pericard was dealing with his own psychological challenges. When you possess a weapon as devastating as a 153 miles per hour serve, the pressure to use it perfectly becomes enormous. Every service game becomes an expectation to dominate. Every lost point feels like a failure of your greatest strength.
There's actually a psychological burden that comes with having an unbeatable weapon. When your serve is that dominant, you start to rely on it exclusively, which can make you vulnerable when opponents adapt or when the pressure of the moment affects your execution.
Then came the moment that revealed the true psychology of this match, the suspension. With Fritz having just completed his miraculous comeback to level the match 2-2, tournament officials decided to suspend play despite having 40 minutes until the 11 p.m. curfew. The crowd's reaction was immediate, an explosive thunderous boos that shook Court 1.
That crowd reaction wasn't just about disappointment, it was about psychological investment. The fans had witnessed something extraordinary, a battle between record-breaking power and remarkable resilience. To have that narrative interrupted felt like a betrayal of the drama they'd invested in emotionally.
Timing of the suspension couldn't have been worse psychologically. Fritz had just completed one of the most improbable comebacks in recent memory. Momentum was completely on his side, and the psychological dynamic had shifted entirely. Now they have to resume tomorrow, giving both players a night to overthink what just happened.
Overnight breaks in the middle of matches create fascinating psychological challenges. Fritz goes to bed knowing he accomplished the impossible, coming back from 2-0 down against record-breaking serves. But he also knows he has to do it all over again tomorrow, which can create anxiety about whether he can recapture that mental state.
For Mpechi Pericard, the overnight break presents a different psychological challenge. He dominated for 2 sets with his record-breaking serve, then watched his opponent somehow find a way to neutralize that advantage. Now he has to figure out how to regain his early dominance, while knowing Fritz has solved his puzzle once already.
The psychological impact of breaking a 15-year-old record during this match adds another layer. Mpechi Pericard achieved something historic, but he's still losing. That creates cognitive dissonance. How can you serve faster than anyone in Wimbledon history and not be winning easily?
This match also reveals something profound about the evolution of tennis psychology. Traditional strategy becomes meaningless when facing serves that fast. Return positioning, anticipation, even technique, none of it matters when the ball is moving at car crash speeds. Players have to develop entirely new mental frameworks.
What Fritz accomplished psychologically is remarkable. He adapted in real time to conditions that have never existed in tennis history. That kind of mental flexibility and resilience under extreme pressure is what separates elite competitors from everyone else.
Broader implications of this match extend far beyond tennis. When tomorrow's match resumes, we'll see whether Fritz can maintain his psychological breakthrough or whether Mpechi Pericard can reassert the dominance of his record-breaking weapon. The overnight break has essentially reset the mental game entirely.
The crowd's furious reaction to the suspension also reveals something about sports psychology from a fan perspective. They'd witnessed something unprecedented and wanted to see how the story ended. Being denied that resolution created genuine anger, they felt psychologically cheated.
For other players watching, this match becomes a template for how to handle the seemingly impossible. Fritz proved that even record-breaking serves can be neutralized through mental resilience and tactical adaptation. That knowledge changes how future opponents will approach similar challenges.
Psychological lessons extend beyond sports. Fritz's comeback demonstrates that when facing overwhelming odds, the key is often to stop trying to control the uncontrollable and focus intensely on the small things you can influence. That's applicable to any high-pressure situation in life.
Record-breaking serve also forces us to confront the limits of human reaction time and athletic ability. At some point, serves become literally unreturnable not because of lack of skill, but because of physics. We may be approaching the absolute ceiling of what's possible in tennis. So what can we learn from this psychological masterpiece? First, that adaptation is possible even under impossible conditions. Fritz proved that human resilience can find ways to compete against forces that seem to transcend normal competition. The mind, when properly focused, can achieve remarkable things.
The key psychological insight is about reframing impossible challenges. Instead of asking, "How do I beat this?" Fritz learned to ask, "How do I stay competitive despite this?" That mental shift from dominance to survival often unlocks performance under extreme pressure.
The match also teaches us about the psychology of momentum and how quickly it can shift. Mpechi Pericard went from making history with his serve to potentially losing a match he dominated for 2 sets. In high-pressure situations, psychological momentum often matters more than physical advantages.
For anyone facing overwhelming challenges in their own life, Fritz's approach offers a blueprint. When the situation seems impossible, focus on process rather than outcome. Control what you can control, adapt to what you can't, and trust that consistency of effort will eventually create opportunities.
The overnight suspension creates a fascinating psychological experiment. Tomorrow, we'll see whether Fritz can recreate his breakthrough mental state or whether the break allows doubt to creep in. Mental momentum is fragile. Maintaining it across time requires extraordinary psychological discipline.
Perhaps most importantly, this match reminds us that records are meant to be broken, but the human spirit's ability to adapt and compete never becomes obsolete. No matter how fast serves get, no matter how overwhelming the opposition, there will always be ways to fight back, if you have the mental strength to find them. Tomorrow, when Taylor Fritz and Giovanni Mpechi Pericard return to Court 1, they'll be resuming more than just a tennis match. They'll be continuing a psychological battle between record-breaking power and human adaptability. Fritz has already proven that the impossible is merely difficult. Now he has to prove he can do it again.
What we witnessed today was a masterclass in competitive psychology under extreme conditions. Fritz showed us that mental resilience can find ways to compete against forces that seem to transcend normal parameters. That's a lesson that extends far beyond tennis courts.
This episode was brought to you by Unstruct.ai, where we explore the psychology behind extraordinary human performance. Today's match wasn't just about tennis, it was about what happens when we face challenges that seem designed to break us. Giovanni Mpetshi Pericard served 153 miles per hour, breaking a record that stood for 15 years. But Taylor Fritz proved that even the impossible can be competed against with the right mental approach. Tomorrow's resumption will test whether human adaptability can consistently overcome overwhelming force, or whether physics eventually wins. Either way, we've already witnessed something remarkable. The moment when sports stopped being about skill and became about surviving the unsurvivable. And in that survival, we found something beautiful about the human spirit's refusal to surrender, even when facing forces beyond our comprehension.